I feel like telling them
No.
is all the traffic eventually just from veterans?
I don't know.
I think it is.
No,
I mean, I was gone for a week and a half, and we like driven around our city yesterday and today, and it's like, I mean, all times of day, it's like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was probably right in front of you. Listen to me 20 minutes.
Hi, good evening. Hi, my name is Jason Allen. I'm the staff planner. Thank you for coming. So today we're going to do a stakeholder meeting because the city has initiated a zoning rewrite. So this committee is going to kind of help steer the direction initially of where the city wants to go during that rewrite process. I guess I'll kind of go around the room and let everyone introduce themselves. Before I do that, we have these two ladies down here. They are from Inspire Creative. They are the consultant firm who is helping the city rewrite the ordinance. So they'll kind of help drive the meeting tonight. And then David, would you want to introduce yourself?
David Bartow, the director of the College Del Tomorrow Foundation.
Marty Hamilton, Southern Adventist University.
Ruthie Gray, and I chair the Collegedale Planning Commission.
Paul Friesen, Planning Commission.
Jake Stone, I work with Mickey Foods.
Wayne Hines, I'm the city manager.
I'm Deandra Moyes with Inspire Placemaking Collective.
Gabby Castro with Inspire.
Okay, so we can go ahead and get started. We prepared a presentation just to help facilitate conversation so that we can get a good understanding of, the direction that we're moving in, what's currently existing, so that we can move forward and make sure that both the city representatives and us understand, what the future and the vision is for this zoning ordinance. So here's a look at our agenda. We kind of did introductions, so we won't need to do that again. But we'll talk a little bit about the zoning ordinance, and we'll talk about zoning. We'll talk about public engagement efforts, and then we'll finally have the discussion. So what is an ordinance rewrite? Zoning ordinances undergo updates periodically, and often when they are outdated or no longer represent the goals and values of the city. And a good code is a code that's constantly being updated. So something that stays in effect for a very long time usually tends to miss some of the new industries that are being created as times go forward. So changes will be made based on reviewing existing code and relevant plans and policies and getting input from the public and from staff as well. And why? Like I explained, an updated and strengthened zoning ordinance can help us guide the kind of development that you all want to see and make sure that it addresses any new trends that are coming in. So why now? As Jason explained, they reached out, well, not reached out, but went through a process to contract someone to come in and help you all out to, one, identify some of the problem areas in the code. There's definitely an understanding that it's a little bit troublesome. There are some things that could be updated or formatted differently to be a bit more user-friendly. Some of the language may be outdated and definitions outdated, so they don't quite address things that are happening today. And to consolidate these chapters and create use tables for easier interpretation, and something that's going to be a bit more user-friendly, so you're able to become educated on your own without needing as much input and help from staff. So as the stakeholders, we're really looking to you all to guide us in a vision from a high level. And this stakeholder group typically involves development community and industry professionals, civic groups, community members that are integrated, truly integrated and committed to the city's future. And I think that, definitely represents the team that we have here. So zoning 101. What is zoning? Why do we use it? So zoning is used to regulate height, setbacks, lot coverage, landscaping buffers, signage, and our favorite uses. And why we do this is to prevent incompatible uses adjacent to each other, limit negative impacts, improve and maintain appearances of lots, and provide consistency in neighborhoods or areas. And why it matters? It encourages development where appropriate. It helps to regulate density at varying levels. So where a higher density may not be appropriate, we're able to protect those areas from that. Where it is appropriate, we're able to encourage that type of development and provide consistency with the comprehensive plan that provides that long-range vision for the future. Include clear definitions and description for uses so that it's not a guessing game and you know what you can do with your property and what you cannot do with your property. And provide updated uses in keeping with current trends. Development patterns change all the time, uses change all the time. Once upon a time, Blockbuster was the biggest thing, and then now it's not. It's not something you see anymore. And also include an easy-to-read zoning map and be predictable for all users. So we're not guessing every once in a while when we're trying to figure out what we're allowed to do, what we can't do, how is this sign going to look. We have this predictability on what's going to happen and what can be expected. So when we talk about public engagement, we're going to be here having a stakeholder meeting. There will be online engagement through survey and interactive maps. There have been some discussions to involve some additional public engagement, but that's still in discussion. And so for the online engagement for the survey and interactive map, we have our social pinpoint site, which helps to consolidate all our information into one place. And Gabby will tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So if you wouldn't mind to go to the website. So on this website, at the top, we will have, we have kind of the project progress. You can track the progress. We also have a place where you can take our survey.
Maybe we could zoom in a little bit on the screen. I think it might be a little harder to see.
Yeah. So you can click on We have an interactive map where you could drop a pin in there and type your comment, and people can engage to your comment. So they can either reply, they can like your comment on there, and you can see other people's comments on there and, add to it or say, respond to it. And then we also have a short survey on the website that you can go on and you can answer. There's a couple questions of like, what do you like to see? So it's 15 questions, and then we also have this document library, so where you can see the existing zoning code and the 2015 land use plan and any new documents that we believe that you guys can see. So maybe this PowerPoint can go up on there, or if when we have the revised zoning ordinance, we can put a draft on there. Those would be located in the document library.
And I think, like Abby explained, there's also this project progress, which I think will be very important to make sure we're all understanding where we are in the process, so that we're not wondering, hey, we just had this stakeholder meeting, so where are we now? Like, what is the next step? What are we moving towards? So I think this is something that's really important as you go through. And you can scan this wonderful QR code if you'd like to gain access to the site from here today, right now. And this is just some more information on the social template site. Oh, sorry.
We'll also post that up on the city's Facebook page.
Oh, one more. Okay. Okay, all clear. Here we go. All right, so now we're going to get into the fun part, the discussion. So if you would just share with us, what are some of your experiences with the zoning ordinance as it relates to, is it user-friendly? Is it predictable? Does it address some of the things that are happening today in the city? And at whatever rate you guys want to go in, whatever order, whatever you'd like to share.
I guess the landscape ordinance doesn't really compute to MUTC zoning. I mean, if we want buildings out on the road with sidewalks out front and trees out front, there's no way to do foundation plantings and everything else on the buildings. MUTC itself is a little bit of a quagmire in as much as it doesn't require live work type environments. I mean, we've got a lot of apartments on MUTC. We've got some commercial on MUTC, but I believe we only have one building in MUTC that actually has both.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what you're saying, MUTC? What does that mean?
MUTC is the multi-use town center, and that zoning was put in place in probably 1999.
I would also say that the commercial standards seem to be focused on big box, and it's not really representative of the development forms we're seeing now. It's intended for a much larger, flatter area than we're living in currently.
Okay. Did anyone else want to add anything on this?
No. As far as representing the university, the zoning, work for us. Obviously, we've been here over 100 years in Collegedale. So, I feel like, the city needs to do the planning that they're doing. And also looking at, where you want development, the density that you're talking about. I think my big concern is when you go down Oodwell Ringgold Road and you see the density of all the new housing, they're really close together. And I know that from a developer mentality, you're trying to, get your profit margin out of that. But it seems to me that a lot of our area has just gone so high density on single family that that concerns me a bit.
Okay.
I think that whatever we're doing with our zoning, we need to capitalize on what makes our city special.
Yes,
And, I think scenic beauty is one of the huge things that attract people to our area, the safety, we're just this little special area. And I know some of the road improvements that we've needed for infrastructure are going to be super helpful. But it also is changing the character of our city. So what can we do through zoning to help protect the character that we still have?
Right.
So protecting the trees and the mountaintops and the greenery, all that's just super, super important, or else we lose who we are.
Right.
I do think our PUD zoning is pretty good. There's some opportunities for refinement and some opportunities to bring it forward with a little better eye on how we're developing now. But to Ruthie's point, being able to cluster it a little bit more on some of these projects, I think is a direction the city would prefer, possibly requiring some street trees and that sort of thing.
Right.
Is a direction I think a lot of the residents would like us to go to soften the aesthetics of these new developments.
Yeah.
And Ruthie, we are looking at ways to incentivize developers to add parks into, subdivisions and stuff like that, to kind of create a sense of community.
What about steep slopes? I mean, would that be part of this or?
Steep slopes are currently omitted, so that would be an area that we could look at refining.
Because I think to address what Ruthie was saying, White Oak is basically, and Grindstone Mountain are the sort of the things that you see when you enter Collegedale. And right now we've kept them pretty much without development on them. And there'd be really nothing worse than to go up on the sides of the mountain with a bunch of subdivisions.
So protection of existing natural resources that add to the character, the unique character of the city.
Right.
Okay.
I think it's important too that we recognize that while Collegedale now is kind of at the edge of the development area, and we're kind of the grounds for new people, it's going to be in the not too distant future that we're going to be a ring inside of where the development is going to be happening. Further development is going to be happening out in Appleton and further up, well, in all directions around Collegedale. So it's important to understand that our infrastructure needs to be in place, and recognizing that a lot of people are going to be going through our community to get to other places. We're not going to be the end where people go to live and whatnot. We're going to be the go-through area. So how do we construct zoning and whatnot that protects the character of what we have here? And well, really what that character is should somehow be defined in this.
Okay.
So I echo a lot of the comments that others have made. I think preserving the natural beauty of this area is important. And I think that is the draw for folks moving into this area. I think about the greenways and, just increasing setbacks, like Wayne was saying, if we can incorporate soft buffers, landscapings on the streetscapes. I know with, from an industrial development point of view, we're doing some of that with the plant expansion up the road. We've got streetscape landscaping there between Appleton Pike and the facility to do just that. I think, I don't know if I guess that's part of the code or the zoning ordinance now. I don't know when, but that's relatively new, I believe, right? So
News relative, but
Okay.
landscaping came in about a decade ago and has been revised a few times.
Yeah.
Um,
So I think that's positive. I think it's going to help with all those things. But again, my concern is also just the density and how we control, the density of these developments and where they're at and how that coincides with infrastructure, because that to me seems like that development is outpacing the infrastructure, and that's what's going to create a lot of our constraints and issues.
There's been comments in the past that our agricultural zoning is a placeholder for what's going to be happening in the future. And I think we need to kind of redefine that it's not a placeholder for houses necessarily, that when we have an agricultural zoning, that's what it is. Now, is agriculture the correct definition of that? Perhaps not. But our open lands are not placeholders for
Future.
whatever may occur.
I think a positive thing that, the city has done already in my 25 years in the community is the parks, Little Debbie Park, where you partner together. The Collegedale Tomorrow, because the original plan was a lot more development, in that MUTC zone. What I'm encouraged about is actually the Greenway and the funding that the city's been able to get, because I think that's critical for a community like ours, is to have sidewalk connectivity. So I applaud the efforts that we've done on the Greenway and hoping that we continue to extend those.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what types of development should be encouraged through the zoning ordinance that either may not be in the zoning ordinance today or is currently a part of the ordinance today, but sort of on the back burner, not really pushed forward? Or are there?
Well, Collegedale Tomorrow's funding right now a master plan for Four Corners.
Mhm.
And I believe most of what's in there is town center type development.
Okay.
We're not really looking at any kind of big box. We're not looking, I mean, big box is dead for all practical purposes. Grocery is about the last big box
Yeah.
remaining. So most of what's there would be pushed out to the road. In the master plan, you've got a copy of the rough draft. It's very Cambridge Square type looking.
Mhm.
And I think that's what, I mean, sorry, I cannot remember your name. Paul, yes, sorry.
Sorry.
But what Paul mentioned, that growth is occurring in Appleton, it's occurring in North Ooltewah, South Ooltewah. We've got to figure out a way to turn Four Corners and Old Ooltewah into a place for people to stop, to eat, to buy
Mhm.
groceries, to do this, do that. Otherwise, if we're just the throughway to get to point A to point B, and it's a pass through, we get all the cars, all the pollution, all the garbage, and we get none of the revenue out of it,
Mhm.
which then just makes the weight of taxes on our homeowners
Mhm.
that much more. So whatever we can do with zoning, in the Four Corners area.
So uses that make Collegedale a destination so that you're not just driving through and saying, this is a beautiful place, but I'm actually going over here. But uses that bring people and have them stay here and not just visit one place, but maybe multiple places.
Right. Well, and to what Marty said, the greenway and the sidewalks,
Mhm.
folks if the kids could walk down from the university on the greenway and eat at a good restaurant,
Mhm.
instead of driving all the way over to Cambridge or driving to Hamilton Place. I think that's sort of the direction, but I'm not sure if that's really zoning or not.
Well, I think there's things that you can do to encourage those types of developments. And that's really what this is geared towards. Like,
Okay.
you want to see developments that bring people that are already here out, that make people aren't stopping here or driving through, they're coming here intentionally, and then maybe staying and visiting some other areas, or some other businesses around.
Right.
And that can be encouraged through zoning, and that could be encouraged through some incentives or certain design requirements that you can create that. Obviously, the market has to drive it, but you can kind of create this environment where the market would thrive in Collegedale
Right.
through zoning ordinance.
And I want to just touch on the walkability as well. I remember 14 years ago as a new mom, I'm like, I want to put this sweet little creature back in the car. I just want to keep walking around. And just our city has come a long ways being walkable, but we have a ways to go. So whatever we can do with zoning to help make sure that we can, leave that car and just go on foot. It just, that's where we want to go.
Okay.
I think that's what I was gonna say. The connectivity of these developments and to Four Corners and the business like that. When I visit other communities, I was in Grand Junction last week, and they have a river trail similar to ours, but the connectivity of that town, the river, and the recreation areas is huge. And we have a great trail system up here, and we have some connectivity to that from here. But it's a destination for those kind of things. So having that connectivity back and having as we build and grow, and I don't know if it's in the current plan where, developers have to connect via sidewalk as they, do street front things. If they do, that's great. But I think those things and doing those in a thoughtful way, not, the minimum sidewalk width, but, something better, just getting those standards established, especially anything roadside would be very important.
Okay.
I do think we need to find a way to right-size development or encourage the correct developments in the correct parts of the city. As an example, just using residential as an example, along Appleton Pike, that would be more appropriate for something like townhomes. But then some of the more rural areas off of Talent Road, for instance, would be more appropriate for gentlemen's farms. And finding a way in the zoning that both can be profitable and fit within the community and connect to the community, I think would be pretty helpful.
Yeah.
Right now, it's pretty hard to get certain things to work due to the price of land and that sort of thing.
Okay. And just some thinking about that, for the most part, you want your code to address current conditions, but you also don't want it to be too prescriptive to where it can address the future, or you have to engage in a large effort to sort of address the future changes. And something like townhomes where like maybe multifamily is okay and like density is okay, but it's the typology that you're really concerned about. That's something that maybe incentives can help to do. So where it's more enticing to the developer to do townhome developments rather than a typical apartment style development. And those are some of the things that could be implemented to sort of encourage that type of use in those types of areas where you can say, here's an incentive for you to do this type of development, because the issue doesn't sound like it's multifamily. It's not necessarily density, but it's the typology that is being implemented for that use. And then, so I guess the next question is the opposite of what we just talked about. But I think I would like to encourage you to think about it from maybe a design perspective. So aside from, I hear walkability, I hear landscape, connectivity. Besides those things, and when we're talking about types of development that you'd like to discourage, maybe shifting it to what about the design of these types of developments would you like to not see? So it's not necessarily, a use or something to that effect, but maybe the design. So if I have an apartment building and on the ground floor, it could be transparent where you can see the lobby, they have their gym on the ground floor or something like that, to where maybe an apartment style building isn't so bad because you have this active use that lines the street or something to that effect. So just like thinking about design of these developments rather than maybe the type per se.
In your code work that you've done, have you ever come across Kohler, Wisconsin?
Over
Kohler, Wisconsin.
Kohler, Wisconsin?
Yeah, it's the factory town of
Okay.
Kohler plumbing fixtures and whatnot. It was designed, but the whole town was designed by Daniel Burnham,
Mhm.
who's a rather famous
Yes.
person for designs of things like Central Park and Chicago, all of their park districts and whatnot. Daniel Burnham set that community up such that there is a huge factory building right in downtown.
Mhm.
But that factory building ends up relating to the downtown facilities more like it was a university.
Mhm.
And people, it's a completely walkable downtown. There's a 5-star resort hotel that Herb Kohler has built there to support his golf courses like Whistling Straits and a few others. But they've managed to bring that all together. It's completely walkable. Every kid can walk to school. There's very little traffic and parking issues and whatnot, yet there's thousands of people come to work there and whatnot every day. I'm wondering, from your experiences, can you perhaps help guide us toward how we can build that kind of compatibility and flexibility into what we're doing? I don't, we're not code writers, but I would hope that you would be able to
So
help us.
I think a lot of that has to do with design, which is why I'm trying to maybe go a little bit more in that direction. For instance, in one city, they had a major issue with automobile-oriented uses, so car washes, gas stations, auto repair, and it was something that was proliferated on this corridor. And so instead of eliminating those uses, it was more about the design. So ensuring that these types of uses are designed in a way where, one, if they're no longer a car wash or a auto repair shop, that it could be reused as something else that still fits into the character and urban form of that area. And also, if you're driving by, you're not going to see it and, interpret it as a car wash or as a car repair. So for that building is industrial for industrial uses, but the public doesn't interact with it in that way because it's designed intentionally not to look like industrial or not to be this use where you kind of want to walk the other way when you see it or think this isn't the area that I want to go in because there's this large industrial building here. So it's really about design and not necessarily uses. Obviously are important, but sometimes you can design certain uses in a way that they still contribute to your character and to your vision for the future. So I think that's really what it comes down to. And that's why when we're thinking about things you'd like to discourage, it's what about that type of development is what you do not want to see? What about that type of development, has a negative perception or a negative engagement with the public realm that could be addressed and maybe through design standards sort of speak to that rather than it being the actual development.
So, there you go. Just kind of a comment. As you were saying, David, you go to Cambridge Square on Sunday or Saturday, and all the kids from the college are there because the city doesn't really have too many commercial uses that students could walk to or members of the public could walk to. The city does have a very well put together design guidelines ordinance, which kind of creates a character around the city that you could see. Jackson is a good example. Circle K is a good example of that. You don't see too many restaurants that look like that if you drive down to Chattanooga or drive through Hamilton County. But one of the main issues is with that, which may kind of be stopping development is, after COVID, prices have skyrocketed for materials and stuff like that. So we are seeing developers saying, your 50% heavy materials requirement for that design is going to cost us a lot of money and it's going to kill the project. So it's kind of more of a comment, but it's finding that fine line of how do we tweak that ordinance to, we still have development that looks good, but we're also encouraging development to come in.
Well, I've always thought we needed at least for the Four Corners area, sort of a design theme book that wasn't so heavily based on, heavy materials or this or that, but, we as a city decide what we want the community to look like. It doesn't mean everything's got to look just alike. And we go to Whitefish, Montana, it's very definitely got a theme. Now there's a modern take on it. There's an old version. They're all brand new buildings, and they're not expensive buildings. A lot of them are just Butler buildings with a skin. And I basically helped pass the whole design standards 10 years ago. We basically just borrowed Overland Park, Kansas's design standards, ran it through Google, took out Overland Park, traded it with Collegedale. And it was 15 years old in Overland Park when we did it. So our design standards are basically based in probably 1995, 2000. And yes, we don't have any of that kind of concrete block on any of the new buildings. And we've got rid of billboards and we've done a lot of stuff, but I'm not sure if they're apropos to what people are building nowadays.
And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be materials, right? And when I say design, I'm not necessarily only speaking to materials. I go back to the example to the apartment buildings where we're looking at active uses on the ground floor. Like that's a part of the building design, is that their active uses, their gym, their lobby, their business center for residents is on the ground floor, and there's transparency so that you can see through it. And you can see those things happening. Like those are things that are part of design that aren't related to materiality, that could be explored. Like those are some of the examples to think about when we're talking about design, not just materials or like you have to have this certain percentage or they have to be from here, which I think are all important things, absolutely. But beyond that, like where the spaces in the building are, like how those spaces engage with the public, are other things a part of design to be considered as well.
I think that ought to be in there.
So like mixed use, like you would have those kind of public interaction spaces on the ground level, and then upstairs is, offices or, private residence or something like that.
It doesn't necessarily have to be mixed
Okay.
use all the time, right? Again, just going back to that residential example, that's a fully residential building, but it's not reading to the public in the public realm like a fully residential building, that it feels like I can't go there, or like this space that's in front of that building is not for me. It feels like this, and it adds to the character like of the street, right? If you're able to have like residential and then you have maybe a use where the public can actually go into, because the residential building is going to be for the residents, then you're not sort of breaking it up where it's like, this is just private property and like it feels like you can't walk past there. It feels like you're not a part of it. But then this section, here I am actually a part of it. You can sort of have this transition that blends, this area that you want to protect, that needs to maintain its residential, character, whether it's single family or low density. Then you have this commercial area. Then you have this sort of transition where you can engage, but not necessarily be mixed use or be office, but it reads that way. So it feels like a part of the public realm without having to be mixed use. Because that's the other thing. If you require mixed use and then someone doesn't want to do mixed use, or a developer is struggling to justify, the market and having mixed use or office or whatever the case is, or that zoning may not allow it, you kind of limit yourself. But if you're able to still get this engagement with the street without necessarily the use changing or more uses being included, you may still have the same effect on the street. So that's just, it doesn't have to be mixed use. An active use doesn't mean a commercial or office use. It's just a use that creates activity on the roadways.
I definitely appreciate that vision that you just casted, because I think one of the biggest things that over the years we've talked about, we just don't want to be a town of just a bunch of strip malls. And what you're talking about, it sounds like you can have different things that say might be in a strip mall, but it's not gonna, it would present a really nice cohesive front.
It's like a blend. Like I think about in Europe, like how you have these little towns that have, they have the restaurants and the coffee shops and then the residences, and it's all sort of mixed in, but it's similar styles. And is that kind of the vision that you're?
I mean, maybe in the mixed use areas, you could see something like that, but it's just creating in the areas where you want to have mixed use, in the areas where you want to promote more public engagement, where you want to promote more pedestrian activity. You don't necessarily have to limit uses when you consider design and how that's going to engage with the public realm. And so in your areas where you have mixed use, where you allow mixed use, you could have a commercial building that may have multiple uses, whether it's, retail and restaurant or office, and then you could have maybe something residential next to it without it feeling like a break.
Right.
Where I'm here doing this commercial, using this commercial building, but then like this part feels like I cannot continue walking down here because that's not a part of it. But on the other side of it might be something that is important and useful that you can be a part of. But you might not walk all the way down the street because you feel like that part's not for me, because look at this building that is not engaging with the public realm.
So I really liked Ruthie's usage of the word cohesive. I do think that's one thing that is probably missing in our zoning. It is very much project, parcel. I will say, I believe the city does reviews incredibly well. I think that's one reason why I like our PUDs and PCDs when they're executed well. Our staff puts a lot more brain power per square foot of development than I think is typical anywhere in this region in terms of reviews and negotiating better products. And so a code that allowed that level of engagement and back and forth with developers to get a more optimal product, because we are putting the effort in on the city side, I think would be very beneficial.
Yeah. And maybe some of the things that you're negotiating with them or you're pushing developers to do could be things that are formalized so that you're not, having certain conversations and trying to push them to do those things. And those are things we can consider as a part of this for sure, yeah.
Well, and I think you can't pass a moratorium on, say, patio apartments. But we would sure like to. I'm sort of envision what you're talking about, say at Four Corners where the Rite Aid is. You could easily have businesses, restaurants, stores, apartments on top. And then what you're talking about, you could have like a big L-shaped apartment building with your big public space on the ground floor facing the intersection. And yeah, it would all feel like one big corner that way. I have nothing against apartments. I think that with mortgages the way they are, interest rates the way they are, apartments are here to stay and they're here to stay for a long time. But these huge patio complexes,
The garden style.
garden style apartments. Those are the ones that worry me.
And I would second that, especially when you see the market trends and the the selling every 2 years on the tax write-offs, et cetera. The garden style are the biggest ones that give staff concern.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
And what is it necessarily about garden style, I guess, apartments that you wish to not see them as much or discourage that type of development?
The acres of open parking and then a big building, acres of open parking, then a big building that are very, I'm going to call it isolationist from the community.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really feel engaged in the community.
Okay.
Whereas if it was a row of townhomes, as an example, with parking in the back,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't address the public street and the common areas, I think it would feel more engaged to the community and
Okay.
like a better fit.
Okay.
I don't think in the correct parts of town that the density really is the issue, and the ownership is not really an issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's more having it be an inclusive community feel
Mm-hmm.
for all of the residents and feel like that those apartments and the people that live in those apartments are citizens too,
Mhm.
not thinking of them as simply transient or renters, because following up on David's, at 8% interest rates on mortgages, people are going to be living in apartments for a foreseeable time before they move to that next phase of life. So finding a form that better fits into the community
Mhm.
would be very beneficial.
Okay.
Years ago, I lived in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is in the center of Amish country. And the downtown essentially died. It was all offices and department stores and all the things that traditionally were in a downtown, much the same as Chattanooga. And the city finally, one of the first things that happened was there was a very dynamic mayor who decided he was going to move. And he lived right in the middle of downtown. And he began to solicit other influential people to move into the center of town. The president of Armstrong World Industries moved downtown. The chairman of the board of Sperry, New Holland, the farm equipment company, moved into the center of downtown. And all of a sudden, restaurants started popping up. All kinds of people-oriented things started popping up. So I think the key there is when we're looking at our zoning, is that we write our zoning such that we recognize that having people there, having people living in all of our areas is an important part of the concept, not just having people living out in this district or people living in that district, but people living everywhere and moving through. And that's when when the people are there, that's when the neighborhood things pop up and the little shops and all the stuff that goes with that. And to think how our downtown could be that way is fascinating to me.
I think there's a concern, David slightly alluded to it. If you're a developer and you do a traffic count,
Mhm.
it's pretty phenomenal at Four Corners. They don't stop. They're going someplace.
Right.
And that's what he's talking, I think, about, is that we've got to get a handle on, from my perspective at a university, it's the master plan. What are we trying to create here? So your zoning, your architectural design standards, or your landscaping, that all comes together. But I've been we're talking a couple of decades of watching what's happened here at Four Corners really not change.
Mhm.
They're stopping a little more now with some things going on, but they're still every day, 5:30 during the week, the cars are backed up to Four Corner and out towards Apison. And it's like, the 5-lane will help on some of that, but it's clearly a bedroom community.
Mhm.
So I think, the apartments and everything that's going on here is that we're a bedroom community.
Mhm.
And so, so that's where I think the walking, the landscaping, the trees, is who we are. So, I'm with David. I'd love to see Four Corners be, reinvented, but that's very expensive. You've got existing buildings in place that I think creates those challenges. But, Cambridge was a good case study, I think, because it suffered dramatically for years because it just didn't have the housing density right close. And it took a while for, occupants and tenants but I watched tenants come and go. And I've seen tenants come and go here at Four Corners. So, there's some real challenges here on how we control, in my mind, that traffic. Where are they going? What are they doing? Why don't they shop here?
Right.
Because otherwise, I don't think we'll be a success, and we'll continue what's been going on for the last 2-3 decades, is they're passing through to go somewhere.
So we recently had a study that'll be publicly published in the next coming months, and the numbers were pretty shocking on the number of citizens that both live and work in the city, and it's about 400. And that's basically almost Southern and a few people at McKee. Otherwise, the workers in this city commute from more rural areas for more affordable housing, and then the folks that live within the city commute to areas downtown to work. And so if there was some way in the code to make it easier for people to live and work within the community, I think that would be spectacular. And I don't necessarily mean telework. I mean, the business owner to live a mile from their business and that sort of thing.
You go look at downtown Atlanta or midtown Atlanta. I mean, there's transformation going on there right now where you've got beautiful old homes, heritage homes, but developers are coming in and going up with apartments, and then they have retail on the first, or they have eateries, or all the services. And so they essentially have created a walking community, because you leave your apartment, you don't take your car, you've got the coffee shop, you've got Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, all these amenities are right around you, and that's a coordinated development to me. So I think you need the housing, kind of what Wayne's saying here is there's got to be some kind of housing to keep them here, not just apartments down a mile down the street.
I have family in Homewood, Alabama, and it makes me think of that. You've got this old, heritage homes, kind of these, this old community, but they've got a park that's very central. And so my family, they love to walk to that park and spend time at the park, and then go to the restaurants. And then they've got some newer modern stuff that's developed on one side of town. And so it's really not standardized from a design architectural standpoint. Maybe on the more modern stuff it is, but you've got this old and this mix of new, the central park, housing around it, and then apartments. But it's kind of like the central hub, which this could kind of be sort of that. Maybe it's not pinpoint center, but it just feels like we could create that around it, so you have that connectivity to it, and you've got old and new, and the restaurants, the coffee shops, whatever it is, and they pop up, and then that creates the places, the businesses people work, and it's just that mix, that blend of those things. But I guess kind of getting back to the question of what should be discouraged, to prevent that from not going the way we want it. Does that not go? I mean, I don't know how you encourage. I don't know how you start that, I guess, how do you encourage it to get it started, but also, be thinking about what you want that end to look like. So you're discouraging, to me, the discouraging things are, not doing connectivity, not doing the landscape, the beautification stuff that kind of go with it to draw people in. So to me, putting those things in and not having zoning ordinances around that would probably be the thing to discourage, but I don't know how to really capture that,
Do we have I know it as a redevelopment agency. That's typically where a municipality has kind of like a development arm. Do we have that?
We do not.
Okay. Because like Cambridge, David's talking about, that's all private money, deep pockets, they have the ability to hold on and make it work. Otherwise, I see other cities using some kind of redevelopment entity that, that often the cities, either through, I don't know how they get their funding, but whether it's taxes or whatever, I've seen numerous cities use those agencies to identify growth areas and basically spawn that development, which brings in more development.
And there have been conversations around that, just to be pretty blunt about it. We have a $14 million annual budget. And so to bring monies to the table that are significant on multi-million dollar programs is difficult without harming residents, taxing residents on a what if possibly, so we have money in the future and taking some risk. We do continually have conversations with developers on pilots and that sort of thing. Again, we get into this scale conversation where Chattanooga is much more capable of doing it than we are based on having their budget just being so much larger. And we've tried to work with a few developers doing special sewer districts to pay for some infrastructure. None of that's gotten off the ground, though I'm pretty confident in the next 5 years that will end up happening on a couple of projects. But to your question, we don't actually have a redevelopment district.
We're working on something like that with Foundation, is putting together a pool of investors to maybe buy some of the old plazas and start redeveloping them to act as, sort of the kickoffs.
It's a catalyst.
Yeah, catalyst. And I, in no way, shape, or form, am speaking for Jake's employer, or trying to impose on McKee Foods. But have you seen where, like Amazon, Facebook, some of these big companies are allowing for, I don't know what you would consider like Amazon zoning, but they're putting housing around, in other words,
Their
they're,
facilities.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know right now our industrial zoning wouldn't even consider that. But with all the land around some of the big plants here, you could really build some great communities. I mean, our air pollution is the smell of honey buns. I mean, it's not exactly like we're making anything, that would be obnoxious to folks living nearby a company here.
So before I speak on that, I just wanted to circle back and say that even though a redevelopment agency is absolutely helpful in, kicking things off and being a catalyst, I have seen where a rezoning, or not rezoning, but a zoning ordinance rewrite occurred. And the areas that actually saw the most redevelopment were not the areas within the redevelopment agency. And it's as those areas that were sort of surrounding the redevelopment agency, as those areas developed, then within the redevelopment agency area, it actually started to develop after the fact. So I think there's definitely ways, again, it's definitely beneficial and helpful and could be a catalyst and all those things, but I don't think, that has to necessarily be in place to create, the changes that you guys are looking to do. But then back to what you were saying, which I forgot just a little bit.
No, it's just,
Housing around the industrial
Yes.
plant.
I think some of those facilities are actually utilizing like a planned development kind of zoning where it may have been industrial at one point, but maybe they're coming in and saying, we own all this area and we're going to plan it out. And so they're doing a rezoning that allows them to say what their uses are going to be and things of that nature. And it will go to the commission or the city council for them to agree, disagree. It's like discretionary
right.
in how they approve it. So I think that's what they're doing. So I don't think they're working within the confines of like industrial zoning. I think they're sort of creating their own. And in understanding their needs and the people who are going to work there and providing that housing for them around there. And I think there are some cities that are thriving because they have these large scale like complexes. Amazon is going out there and moving out there, but they all come with their own negative impacts as well. But
It is interesting though, David, if we look at like where the center, if we run just zip codes on our entire Collegedale campus, employee base, where the center of that is. And I can't remember because I did this analysis a while back when we were looking at plant sites. It wasn't here. I mean, it wasn't in Collegedale. It was
Up in Bradley?
No, it was, I want to say it was maybe over off Highway 58 somewhere. I mean, it wasn't where I thought it was going to be, wherever it was. But there is some strategy to that. Like if you've got this, the big employer, and so when you think about housing that's affordable for that demographic to be around there, so you provide that housing so that the people are living here versus other places, but then you're bringing other business and industry, so that's creating the need for that. So I don't know, and again, how you tie that into zoning, but to make from a strategic standpoint of encouraging people who work at these facilities, these larger employers in the area to live close, and then it drives the economy here to help with what we're trying to do.
And I think this could be a good segue into the next two questions. And like you were saying about the honey bun factory, like that's the extent of industrial, but maybe it's redefining what industrial means and maybe pulling out some uses that may have been classified as industrial once upon a time, but today, based on new technology and other things, aren't as industrial as they once were. So maybe there are things that we can, implement in other places or allow other things closer to them than before, or remove some regulations that, discourage folks from coming in and doing those types of businesses. So like, for instance, food processing. So folks who are, sort of making the food somewhere and then packaging them there or bottling them there. Like once upon a time, that's probably something we'd consider more industrial. And so we wouldn't see them in certain areas, or residential uses or other commercial uses wouldn't be near them because they're industrial and you sort of have them off to a different area. But they could be pulled in a little bit closer maybe. And then we go back to talking about design, and the design of those buildings aren't reading as industrial because that use isn't as industrial as it once was. So it kind of leads me to this next two, where are there new uses or industries that should be addressed, or are there uses in industries that should be further regulated or removed, or looked at again or redefined? Maybe they're not, again, done in a way where they have a negative impact anymore. The new technology has transformed how those businesses operate.
I think there's some opportunities in both commercial and industrial, but I use industrial as an example. The impacts of industrial, and I'll use McKee as an example. It's not their factory. There's very little noise. To David's point, the only aromas are actually usually pretty pleasing. Mm-hmm. So their negative impacts are going to be large parking lots and truck traffic. Mm-hmm. So there might be a way to separate the two. Mm-hmm. The plant itself in an area wouldn't be that bad, but do you then regulate parking and truck traffic in a way that maybe it has a smaller impact on the community, but you're not as worried about the actual plant location,
right?
Just how that traffic flow works.
Yeah, I think that's, and again, I think that speaks to site plan design and like where those trucks may be able to access the site, or considering a reduced parking. Like, for as much parking as required, is it actually necessary to the operation of it? Like, is that something we can look at to think, hey, do we really need X number of spaces per square foot for that building, for that use? And how can that be accommodated? That building is pulled forward and the parking we're not going to see because it's placed in the rear. It can still be an industrial building with an industrial use, but something that doesn't reach to the public as such and addresses concerns like how the trucks get in there and, where they get in. And some of those things might relate to the site contextually. Like, we'd have to understand like the site, but we can begin to think those are some of the things that could allow those uses without necessarily saying like, this can't go here, this type of use, but if this use is here, this is how it needs to actually happen.
Like a commercial kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
I was up in Cleveland the other day and talking to the owners of a cheesecake company. And it turns out that in their shopping mall, someone I think the city actually helped pay for it. They put in like an industrial kitchen in one of the old big boxes. That I think there's 8 different 8 different restaurants use that. I mean, would that be industrial? Would that be commercial? Would that be,
Currently, it would fall under commercial.
Even like craft makers, like artisan craft makers who are manufacturing soap and body lotions and different things like that. Like those are uses that could have some sort of retail component to it, that you could, I make my soap here, but I also have this retail storefront here. And so it could, one, you can see someone making it, and that's the allure sometimes. That's the allure with breweries. You get to see, all the things happening behind the scenes, and then you get to drink a little bit of the beer as well. But the same thing with craft makers, like you could sort of have that same allure where I can see this, and that can also be engaging aside from just the retail of my soap products, of my lotion, my body butters and lotions, of my jewelry that I'm making. And you sort of allow maybe residents who live here, who are in the city, to also have this business component that occurs within the city as well. So you retain, and I think it goes back to what the city manager said, like retaining people here, both living here, working here, and enjoying what's here. So those are some of the things I think when I say new industries or new uses that may not be considered or could be considered differently or encouraged. Okay. So as it was said earlier, the Social Pinpoint site is going to be on the city website and Facebook page.
Yes, in Instagram.
And Instagram. And I think this goes into the last 2 questions. How can we spread the word that this information is available there? And, we're using Facebook and Instagram, but are there other platforms that could be appropriate? And, of course, it's a recommendation because there are, public record laws. So, of course, any platforms that are used would have to be able to meet those guidelines. So we may not be able to consider all of them, but are there any other social media platforms or platforms in general that could be used to spread the word about what's happening here and what's going on and what changes may be coming?
Southern's little newspaper has gotten to be really darn good lately. Not just because they did a great story on my project, but no, they're really getting good. The reporting staff is good. Whoever's doing the editing is doing a fantastic job. I mean, the Accent
Blake.
has turned into a good little newspaper, and the kids seem to read it, and the people in the community on the other side of the mountain read it.
That's
So
a
I
good
think maybe
suggestion.
reaching out to them about doing an article on this would be a good idea.
Okay. And, okay. So this would be the end. And I think we got a lot of great feedback and understanding that obviously whatever occurs has to be contextual, continues to protect and promote the city's existing unique character. You guys are looking for walkability, connectivity, keeping people here, sort of changing the dynamic from being this pass-through place to this place where people come as a destination, where residents who already live here are enjoying and engaging with what's around here. And so I think we got a lot of feedback in regards to that. And before we close, is there anything else that anyone would like to add?
Some further thoughts on we have a local chamber group, Kiwanis, all those community groups. I don't know if somebody from the city attends some of those just to say, hey, we're doing this. We want your feedback. Your groups are important to us, the BFW. Those are just some other ideas that aren't necessarily just people on their computers, but just getting out and seeing people face to face. Posting it in the library.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming out, sharing your thoughts. And thank you, everyone, for attending as well.
And if you have comments, we want to put, the website is live and we will be updating that. So if you want to go in and do the survey, want to put in, where you want some residential or like you have an idea that you want to, residential should look like this or something like that, you can put that on there. You can even put pictures, I think. We just have to approve them. But yeah, share on the website.
All right, thank you everyone for coming. Like I said, follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get updates, and then our website for any additional meetings that we may add in the future. Thank you.
So I updated the telephone. So I should have had both of these stars.